come on, make a move. Everybody, say it, make a move.
I've expressed my admiration for practitioners of the hard sciences, particularly physics, and nothing I'm about to say diminishes that admiration. But in one respect, as smart as they are, they've got it all wrong. When you hear people talk about spaceflight, you often hear analogies to help the layman understand how difficult it is. You'll hear things like, it would be like shooting an arrow from a speeding train in New York and hitting a paper plate in Los Angeles, or words to that effect. Now, I understand the intent of the analogy, which is to help relative dummies understand the complexity of the calculations required for spaceflight, or even rocket flight, except in North Korea, where they seem to do their calculations on an abacus. And it goes without saying, this requires an extraordinary level of knowledge and skill, but in terms of factual accuracy, which is after all what these folks are all about, the analogy could not be more wrong. And the answer to why it is wrong all comes down to one thing: variables. By variables, in this case, I mean the number of factors one has to consider in order to make accurate predictions, and more to the point, the way that these variables interact with each other. The variables in space, while substantial, are limited, quantifiable, and calculable. The variables in the atmosphere, through which one would have to shoot this hypothetical arrow, are so vast that, at least with our current level of knowledge, they are utterly and completely incalculable. Wind, humidity, air pressure, temperature, and other constantly changing conditions form a continuously evolving soup that one has to shoot this arrow through in order to hit the plate. That's why it becomes possible to land a man on the moon, but impossible to hit the plate. And that's why it is much harder to predict tomorrow's weather than it is to land a man on the moon. Ridiculous? Well, only because we've learned to accept weather forecasts that are usually wrong. And by wrong, I mean not right. And by not right, I mean off by 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Reasonably accurate would be maybe 1/100th of a degree. Not hundreds of times that. Never mind the probabilities of rain or snow at certain times of the day, which they get wrong much more often. Here's a simpler example. It's much easier to land a man on the moon than it is to accurately predict where each of these balls will end up once the shot is over. Even if one carefully controls the speed and angle of the cue ball, as soon as the cue ball hits the first racked ball, it sets off a chain reaction of balls colliding with each other and with the rails with so many variables as to make the final position of each ball unpredictable. Now, to prove that accurate predictions can be made, I'm going to make one right now. I predict that if Houston had told Neil Armstrong their trajectory calculations would be accurate to within 2 to 3 degrees, I forecast a 100% probability of him punching them in the face. Or at least wanting to. I understand he was a gentleman. Variables are what make it impossible to predict the weather accurately. They make it impossible to predict the near-term direction of the stock market, and along with evolutionary biology, impossible for a centrally planned economy to ever work. We've talked a lot about why it's unwise to control the behavior of our fellow humans through the use of force, how this breaks the laws of nature, and why, and we've examined the very numerous examples that show this to be true. In addition to all that, the presence of an incalculable number of variables in the way humans interact with each other, the things in life we choose to place value on, the lengths to which we will go to make those things happen, the methods that we choose to use, make a centrally planned economy not only a really bad idea, but even if it were a good idea, completely impossible. By way of comparison, it would be much easier to build a single human being starting at the cellular level with such precision that the maker could forecast every choice that person would make, from their favorite color to the brand of toothpaste they would choose to use on their 30th birthday. This assumes, of course, that the planner is trying to create a successful human society. It's actually quite easy to plan an unsuccessful society. You thoroughly, systematically, and forcibly remove incentives for success. Now, who would want to do a thing like that?